Films together for 47 years. And I wanted to do another film with her before I died.
And then to kiss him again in my almost 80s.
What do you mean almost?
Robert Redford, a name that instantly calls to mind golden sunsets, unforgettable characters, and a career that spanned decades. He wasn't just an actor.
Okay, Pop, I'm sorry for you, I'm sorry.
He was a symbol. But behind the polished Hollywood smile and the string of iconic roles lies a man who lived through tragedy, controversy, and transformation. From reluctant stardom to shaping an entire generation of independent filmmakers, Redford's story is one of brilliance and heartbreak. And even in his final years, he remained as unpredictable as ever. When Robert Redford first appeared on screen in the 1960s, audiences were immediately captivated. His looks, his charisma, his presence, it was the birth of a star. By the late 60s, he was no longer just another actor. He was a cultural force. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid turned him into a household name, and just 3 years later, the way we were cemented him as the ultimate leading man. Hollywood had seen stars before, but Redford was different. He had the looks of a matinee idol, yet the instincts of a serious artist. He didn't want to be boxed into shallow, heartthrob roles, but his golden boy image was impossible to ignore. And as the roles piled up, Redford carefully built a career that balanced mass appeal with deeper, more meaningful work. He wasn't just chasing fame, he was rewriting what it meant to be a leading man in Hollywood. But while the world saw perfection on screen, Redford was already struggling with a label he never truly wanted. From the very start, Robert Redford pushed back against being seen as just another pretty face. Yes, he had the golden hair and the piercing blue eyes, but he wanted substance. He wanted to tell stories that mattered. Still, magazines and studios kept marketing him as the all-American dream. Redford often described the attention as suffocating. Fans wanted the fantasy, but he wanted freedom. He longed to be taken seriously, not idolized like some untouchable figure. Even at the height of his fame, he admitted feeling isolated, trapped by an image he didn't control. But instead of fighting it directly, he did something smarter. He leveraged that fame to gain power behind the scenes. Every glossy magazine cover meant more clout. And with that clout, Redford began building something that would change Hollywood forever. Because if the industry wanted him to play the star, he would, but on his own terms. Redford's first love was always storytelling, and by the late 1970s, he was ready to step behind the camera. His directorial debut, Ordinary People, stunned Hollywood. A quiet, devastating family drama. It wasn't flashy, it was raw, intimate, and deeply human. To the shock of many, it swept the Oscars in 1981, with Redford himself winning Best Director. Overnight, he had proven what he always knew. He was more than just a face. He was an artist, but directing wasn't enough. Redford saw an entire industry that ignored new voices, sidelined creativity, and prioritized profits over passion. So, in 1981, he created the Sundance Institute. What began as a workshop for indie filmmakers grew into the Sundance Film Festival, the single most important launchpad for independent cinema. Without Redford, films like Reservoir Dogs, Clerks, and Little Miss Sunshine might never have found their audience. He didn't just create a festival, he created a movement. But while his professional life thrived, Redford's personal life was haunted by shadows few ever saw. For all his success, Robert Redford's life was scarred by devastating loss. In 1959, at just 22 years old, he and his first wife Lola lost their infant son, Scott, to sudden illness. The tragedy shook him to his core. He would later admit that grief shaped the way he saw the world, and even the way he acted. But tragedy didn't end there. Redford and Lola went on to have 3 more children, yet heartbreak continued. In 2020, his son James, known as Jamie, passed away from cancer at just 58. Jamie had been not only Redford's son, but also his creative partner in documentaries and activism. These losses weren't widely publicized. Redford kept his private life closely guarded, never turning grief into spectacle. Yet those who knew him say it was this undercurrent of pain that gave his performances their quiet depth. Behind the glamorous Hollywood image was a man who had lived through more sorrow than most could imagine. And while personal tragedy marked his private life, public causes soon defined his legacy beyond the screen. Long before activism became a celebrity trend, Robert Redford was already on the front lines. Starting in the 1970s, He used his fame to fight for environmental causes, long before climate change was a mainstream conversation. He partnered with groups like the Natural Resources Defense Council and spoke out against unchecked development. His passion for the environment wasn't performative, it was personal. Living in Utah, surrounded by mountains and open skies, he saw firsthand what was at stake. But Redford's activism didn't stop there. He championed political transparency, supported Native American rights, and used Sundance as a platform for marginalized voices. In a town built on image and ego, Redford wielded his influence differently, not for more power, but for more change. And while many actors saw activism as a side project, for Redford, it was central to his identity. He wasn't just a star, he was a fighter, but eventually, even fighters grow tired. And by the late 2010s, Redford began to consider the unthinkable, walking away from the spotlight for good. For decades, Robert Redford seemed unstoppable, always reinventing, always working, always moving forward. But by 2018, he admitted the time had come to step away from acting. In an interview promoting The Old Man and the Gun,
I love working with her. I would certainly do it again.
Redford revealed that it would likely be his final screen role. After nearly 60 years in the business, he was ready to slow down. Never say never, he added, but I've been doing this since I was 21, and it feels like it's time. The film, where he played an aging bank robber still chasing thrills, felt like a fitting farewell, both playful and deeply reflective. Yet, Redford was never comfortable with the word retirement. Just weeks later, he backtracked, saying he regretted making such a final statement. It was classic Redford, restless, unpredictable, never fully done with storytelling. In the years that followed, he kept a low profile, but his voice never disappeared. He lent his narration to passion projects, supported Sundance from behind the scenes, and stayed vocal about environmental issues. And then, in March 2025, he surprised fans with a quiet cameo in the thriller series Dark Winds. It lasted only moments, but it marked the last time audiences would see Robert Redford on screen, a subtle farewell from a man who had given everything to the craft. His final curtain call wasn't marked by spectacle or fanfare. Instead, it was understated, just as he preferred. A quiet goodbye from a legend who had already said everything he needed to through his work, his activism, and his life. But beyond the career milestones and film festivals, there was another side to Redford, one rooted in love, family, and the private happiness he protected fiercely. Behind the Hollywood icon was a man who valued privacy more than fame. Robert Redford was never drawn to the glitz of Los Angeles. Instead, he built his sanctuary in the mountains of Utah, where he created Sundance part home, part haven for art and nature. It was there, away from flashing cameras, that he lived his most authentic life. In 1996, Redford met Sibylle Sagers, a German-born multimedia artist. More than 20 years his junior, she wasn't dazzled by his fame. Their connection began simply as two people drawn to each other, without the weight of celebrity. By the time they married in 2009, Redford was clear Sibylle had given him, in his own words, a whole new life. Together, they shared a bond built on creativity, art, and their shared love for nature. But family was always at the center of his world. Despite enduring unthinkable losses, Redford remained deeply connected to his daughters, Shauna and Amy, and later to his grandchildren. Those closest to him describe a man who was surprisingly humble, more comfortable in jeans and hiking boots than tuxedos and red carpets. Even as the world saw him as a legend, he never seemed to live like one. He valued authenticity over image, simplicity over excess. To those who knew him best, Robert Redford wasn't just an Oscar winner, or a festival founder, or even an activist. He was a father, a husband, and a man who fought to stay true to himself in an industry that thrives on illusions. And now, with his passing, the question remains, how do we measure the legacy of a man who gave us so much both on screen and far beyond it? Robert Redford's passing in 2025 closed the chapter on one of Hollywood's most extraordinary lives, but his story is far from over. His films remain timeless. His Sundance legacy continues to elevate new storytellers, and his activism still inspires generations to fight for the planet. He was more than just an actor or a director. He was a builder, a fighter, a visionary who reshaped the way the world sees cinema. From Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to All the President's Men, from the quiet intimacy of ordinary people to the cultural force of Sundance, his fingerprints are everywhere. But perhaps Redford's greatest legacy isn't found in awards or box office numbers. It's in the countless young filmmakers who finally got their chance, the audiences who were moved by his work, and the people who will remember him not as an untouchable icon, but as a man who dared to stay true to himself. Even in death, Redford leaves behind a challenge to live boldly, to tell stories that matter, and to never stop fighting for what you believe in. His curtain may have fallen, but the echo of his work, his vision, and his life will never fade. So, what do you think Robert Redford's greatest legacy truly is? His films, his activism, or the lives he touched behind the scenes? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.